Hi, Montana. Day 66 at the legislature. We had 2 floor sessions today. We couldn't quite get through our entire agenda, so we took a break for an afternoon committee and came back at 4. We had 16 bills total. 3 of them were almost unanimous. 3 of them were exactly party lines or within 1 or 2 votes, and the rest were a mix. We got some good news and bad news as usual. We passed a bill to revise sentencing laws. We reconsidered the bill to encourage the film industry in Montana, and it passed, which is almost unheard of, so that is a win. We passed a bill to provide for school counselors to be able to be licensed to do private practice therapy outside of school hours, and we passed a weird bill that increases the bed tax for nursing homes, which sounds so bad, but it's because if we get those tax dollars, we can get a federal match and then get that money back to the nursing homes. Kind of an interesting way to do business. We passed a bill to extend term limits. This is a really interesting topic as well. Right now, Montanans had overwhelmingly voted in term limits, saying that you could serve 8 years in the House and 8 years in the Senate, I think it was. And through new interpretation of the way that law is written, legislators are serving 8 terms in the House, or 8 years in the House, and then 8 years in the Senate, and then 8 years in the House, and then 8 years in the Senate. So essentially, the legislators have found a way to get around term limits completely, which I don't think is in accordance with what the voters wanted. This bill changes our term limit laws to say that you can serve 16 years total, whether it's all 16 in the House or all 16 in the Senate. You have to have a break. I believe the break is 4 years, and then you can go back. And it was interesting to hear the debate because the people who, of course, are using the new interpretation of the term limit laws to essentially not be term limited were against this because someone would have to run for their seat in that break in between terms. And they're the same people who say, Montanans hate term limits, we shouldn't pass this law. We passed a bill that bans drones over wildfires because apparently there have been incidents where people are coming in to take pictures using their drones, and all of the firefighting aircraft have to be called back because there are drones in the airspace. We heard a constitutional amendment to define a person on the floor today. A constitutional amendment takes 2/3 of the legislative body. It got 59 votes, which means that it would need 41 in the Senate to pass. I will be very surprised if it gets 41 in the Senate. And I think it's important to think about the fact that this legislation would mean that a woman who has a miscarriage could potentially be questioned about whether it was actually a miscarriage or not, and then prosecuted for murder because her unborn child, fetus, baby, whatever term you want to use, is defined as a person in law. So that was not a very fun discussion to listen to. We passed House Bill 633. I think a lot of you will be interested in this. House Bill 633 allows for communities to get impact fees from the company TransCanada in exchange for the property taxes that they would be paying after the Keystone Pipeline was built. The impact fees are meant to build a war chest against protesters. So it specifically says in the bill that the impact fees are used to hire law enforcement. They can be taken from the company before the pipeline is built, so they could start getting these impact fees now. And the proponents of the bill said that's not what it's for. Whenever you have increased population to build a project, you have increased crime, and that's why we need more law enforcement. But I truly believe that that bill is just meant to be able to hire more law enforcement and buy more military equipment to squash the folks who are planning to protest the Keystone Pipeline. And that passed today. And it is, incidentally, brought to us by the same exact man, the chair of the Republican Party, who is on the record in the national press saying that he does not want us to use vote by mail because, quote, it might not be a quote, because Democrats win when we do that. So he wants to suppress the vote and he wants to suppress the protesters. The chair of the party. And then lastly, we passed a bill that I talked about in Business and Labor that, in my opinion, and in several of our opinions, allows the insurance commissioner to not do his job in protecting consumers against insurance fraud. So a lot of good work done today, some really bad stuff that came through, some of which might make it all the way through to the end and some of it might not. I will let you know what happens tomorrow. Thanks.